Most people believe that pulling away means you stopped caring, that distance is a decision, that silence is indifference. But psychology shows something far less obvious. Sometimes people don't pull away because they don't care. They pull away because staying present once felt unsafe. And the strange part is that most people don't even notice when this starts happening. It doesn't arrive dramatically. There is no argument, no clear turning point, no moment you can point to and say, "This is when I changed." It happens quietly, gradually, almost invisibly. You are still there, still responding, still showing up, still functioning. But something inside you has already stepped back, and over time, that small step becomes a pattern. At first, it feels reasonable. You tell yourself you are just being careful, that you are choosing peace, that you are protecting your energy. It sounds mature. It sounds healthy. It even sounds admirable. But what most people don't realize is that the mind rarely explains its defenses. Honestly, it doesn't say I learned that closeness leads to pain. Instead, it says, this is just who I am. And that is how protection slowly becomes identity. If you look closely, you may notice that this pattern didn't form when life was calm. It formed during moments when being fully present had consequences. Moments when speaking honestly created conflict. When needing reassurance created disappointment. When showing emotion led to being misunderstood, ignored, or minimized. Your nervous system paid attention. Even if you didn't, it noticed which behaviors reduced tension, which responses avoided friction, which versions of you were easier for others to handle. And slowly, without asking your permission, it began to favor those versions. This is how people learn to stay quiet instead of expressive, flexible instead of firm, understanding instead of honest, not because they lack needs, but because expressing those needs once felt costly. And the most important thing to understand is this: the mind does not optimize for happiness, it optimizes for safety. So if staying fully present once felt dangerous, your system adapted. It didn't make a conscious decision, it made an efficient one, and efficiency feels like truth over time. That adaptation stops feeling like something you do and starts feeling like who you are. You may tell yourself that you are independent, that you don't need much, that you prefer distance. But notice what happens when someone actually gets close. Notice the tension in your body, the urge to pull back. The impulse to soften yourself, to explain less, to reveal less. That reaction is not preference, it is conditioning. Your body remembers something your mind has already rationalized away. This is why compliments can feel uncomfortable, why care feels heavy, why being wanted creates pressure instead of ease. Not because you dislike connection, but because connection once came with expectations you couldn't meet, or effort that was never returned, or emotional labor that went unseen. So your system learned a rule. If you don't attach deeply, you won't be disappointed deeply. That rule works. At first, it reduces pain, it creates predictability. It gives the illusion of control, and control feels safe. This is why emotional distance often gets rewarded. People describe you as calm, stable, low maintenance, emotionally mature. They admire your self-sufficiency, your composure, your ability to stay unaffected. What they don't see is the cost, the constant self-monitoring, the internal editing, the effort it takes to remain easy to be around. They don't see how often you translate yourself into something acceptable, how often you reduce what you feel before it reaches the surface. And after a while, even you stop noticing that you are doing this. That is when the pattern becomes most dangerous. Because emotional distance doesn't always look like loneliness. Sometimes it looks like stability. Your relationships are not chaotic. Your life is not falling apart. Nothing is obviously wrong. And yet, something feels flat. You show up, you participate, you listen, you care, but you feel like you are watching your life through glass. Present, but untouched. This numbness is often misunderstood. People assume it means something is broken, but numbness is not a failure. It is a signal. It means your system has been surviving for too long and is no longer willing to feel deeply without safety. So instead of feeling, you analyze, you explain your emotions instead of experiencing them. You intellectualize discomfort, you Turn feelings into insights, because insight feels safer than vulnerability. You become someone who understands everything but feels very little, at least on the surface. This creates a strange internal conflict. Your mind wants connection, but your body resists it. Your thoughts crave closeness, but your nervous system prepares for withdrawal. And because this conflict is uncomfortable, most people resolve it by choosing distance. Distance reduces tension. Distance restores control. Distance keeps expectations manageable, but distance also reinforces the very belief that created the pattern in the first place. That belief is simple and devastating. If I stay fully present, something bad will happen. And the longer this belief runs unchallenged, the more convincing it becomes. Not because it is true, but because it is familiar. Here is the part most people never question. You did not become emotionally unavailable because you don't care. You became emotionally unavailable because you cared deeply. Your distance is not indifference, it is protection. It is a boundary that never learned how to relax. And now, that boundary stands between you and the connection you want most. This is why relationships can feel empty, even when they are stable. Why nothing is wrong, yet something is missing. You are not disengaged, you are restrained. And restraint eventually becomes exhausting, because holding yourself back requires constant effort. If you are honest, you may remember the moment when you stopped asking. For what you needed, it was not dramatic. It was quiet. A few unmet expectations, a few emotional letdowns, a few times when you were told you were too much or not enough. So you adjusted, you lowered the volume on your needs, you shortened your explanations, you stopped reaching first. And over time, you stopped noticing that you were leaving yourself behind. This is how disappearance happens, not through rejection, but through repeated self-abandonment. And the most painful part is that this adaptation once helped you survive, which makes it very hard to let go, because the mind does not want to release strategies that once worked, even when they are no longer necessary. This is why change does not begin with forcing yourself to open up. Force triggers resistance. Pressure reinforces protection. Real change begins somewhere quieter. It begins with noticing. Noticing the moment you pull back. The moment your body tightens. The moment you minimize what you feel. Awareness interrupts autopilot. And autopilot is what keeps patterns alive. You do not need to become more vulnerable overnight. You do not need to reinvent yourself. You do not need to explain everything you feel. You only need to stay present 1 second longer than usual. That 1 second matters. It teaches your nervous system something new, that presence does not always end in harm, that being seen does not always require self-erasure over time. Those seconds accumulate. They become tolerance, then capacity, then safety. Not the kind of safety that comes from control, but the kind that comes from being real and remaining intact. You may still feel the urge to retreat. That does not mean you are failing. It means your system is recalibrating. Years of adaptation do not dissolve instantly, but each time you notice the pattern without obeying it, you loosen its grip. Each time you allow yourself to want without apologizing, you reclaim something that was never meant to be lost. Slowly, invisibility stops feeling like relief and starts feeling like a limitation. You are allowed to take up emotional space. You are allowed to be affected. You are allowed to need without negotiating your worth. The right connections will not require you to disappear to maintain peace. They will not confuse your distance with strength or your silence with maturity. They will meet you where you are, not where you learn to hide. If any part of this feels uncomfortable, that is not a problem. It is a sign that something true is being touched. And truth often feels unsettling before it feels freeing. You do not need to rush this. You do not need to fix everything. You only need to notice when you are leaving yourself behind and gently choose to stay. Because the version of you that learned to pull away did so to survive. But the version of you listening now is ready for something more. And that shift does not begin with someone else. It begins the moment you realize You were never hard to care for. You were simply taught that being fully present was unsafe. And now, you are allowed to relearn something different.